This week's episode is sponsored by Logitech.
You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For 50 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan Weitz.
Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. My name is Alan Weitz.
And I'm Jill Waterman.
And don't be surprised if our audio engineer, Mike Weinstein, hops on the mic with a question or two at one or more points along the way. If you're listening to this podcast, I have a short list of questions for you. And don't worry, it's not a quiz you can't fail. Do you own a DSLR or mirrorless camera? How about a smartphone that takes terrific photographs and videos? When you back your car up, do you watch a live feed of everything going on behind you on a dashboard screen? How about real-time x-rays? Does your dentist still wait for a lab assistant to develop the film? Have you ever seen pictures taken inside your digestive tract by a camera you swallowed like a pill? Do pictures from Mars make you reflect on our place in the universe? If you answered yes to any or all of the above, you can thank today's esteemed guest. Eric Fossum invented the CMOS active pixel sensor back in 1993 while working at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab. As part of his JPL mandate to seek commercial and consumer applications for his emerging CMOS sensor technologies, he was also active in the transfer of this technology to industry. A physicist and engineer who holds 181 U.S. patents, Fossum is also a serial entrepreneur and the founder of several high-tech companies. While his enormous list of honors, appointments, and memberships and accomplishments make our heads spin, a couple of awards deserving of special mention are a 2021 Emmy Award in Technology and Engineering and the prestigious Queen Elizabeth Prize for Engineering, considered by many as engineering's Nobel Prize, which he received in 2017. Oh, did we mention the good professor and his wife also operate a hobby farm in New Hampshire as a form of relaxation? Professor Eric Fossum, welcome to our show.
Well, thank you very much. And wow, that was a long introduction.
I'm exhausted. So the question for you, many questions for you. You've been interested in science since you were a tyke, and you particularly enjoyed doing hands-on science exploration at a science center that's located not far down the road from where I currently live in the northern reaches of Connecticut. What was the nature of these early explorations?
Well, I think I worked on tracking weather balloons as I go over the Talcott Mountain Science Center there in Avon, and using a theodolite and having to use trigonometry before I even knew what trigonometry was. So that was probably around 7th grade or something like that.
How big were these balloons? I'm not familiar with these. And how high did they fly?
Yeah, they're not like some Chinese weather balloon. They are kind of just amusement park sort of sized balloons filled with helium. And they go up at a constant rate. And when the wind blows them, you can pretty much determine what the wind speed must be, infer it from how you track the angle of the balloon at a particular time. But then I moved on and learned about computer programming while I was there. And maybe if I was smarter, I could have been Bill Gates. I don't know. But it was that era anyway.
This is really ground floor for all of this stuff. You were at the very, very base of it.
Yeah, I was very, very lucky to be able to use that facility and learn from the teachers there. So thank goodness for that. Luck is such an important thing in life, isn't it?
Oh, oh, absolutely. I can give you a long list of those things. Steve Sasson, a past guest on the show and a friend of yours who happened to invent the digital camera used to cannibalize derelict TVs he found curbside in Brooklyn for parts for his teenage experiments. Did you do anything of that sort when, with your earlier explorations?
I don't think my parents would have let me take something apart. I enjoyed launching model rockets, the old Estes rockets.
The Estes rockets, of course, yes.
Blowing things up from time to time, and then putting rockets in cars that go horizontally.
The CO2 cartridges?
No, these were the Estes, chemical rocket engines.
Oh, you use those in cars too. Oh, okay,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
right, okay. See, my father drew the line there. Okay, with CO2 cartridges for balsa race cars. The Estes rockets use those other ones as well, and I did that with my kids. So that's what was also there's a big science company that when I was a kid, I used to look at their stuff all the time. Their catalogs and all kinds of bizarre experiment kits. Half of them probably you couldn't even buy today. They'd be illegal to sell them, like the old chemistry sets. Do you know which company I'm talking about?
I do know the sets that you're talking about, but I can't recall.
Edmund Scientific.
Oh, Edmund, yes.
Anyway, CMOS sensors. Now they're at the heart of modern day photography. Did you have any interest in either taking pictures or the science of photography back in the day when you started to first tinker around, or was photography just a peripheral?
Well, when I was a kid, I took pictures with my Brownie Kodak camera and its successors, as my family would pile us kids into the station wagon and drive across the country to like Yellowstone or Grand Canyon and stuff like that. So I have pictures from those times that I took, but I enjoyed it. But I wouldn't say I was fascinated by it. I just enjoyed doing it. But of course, at that time and having very frugal parents, it was like, okay, today's Wednesday, you can take another picture.
and you always looked ahead on the calendar. So I know that there are some months that have 5 Wednesdays in it. Which ones are the good ones? What about today? Again, since you have an awful lot of influence on the world of photography, do you consider yourself a photographer? Do you, aside from just snap shooting, do you walk around with a camera? Do you take pictures for the art of photography?
Well, I have a friend who's an actual photographer, and he says I take very nice postcards. I think that's an insult, but
no, they were lousy postcards. No, it's not. That's actually I've seen some really lousy postcards. So if you're saying they're good postcards, they got to be at least decent pictures. So I would say take it as a compliment.
Yeah, I get some good shots from time to time, but they're not super artistic or anything. It's just things that I think are like, wow, that is so amazing that Mother Nature is putting on that sunset show for me that I need to take a picture.
So on a similar thing, when you were a teen, you attained the rank of Eagle Scout. And what did you do for a service project, if I may ask?
Sure. I'm very proud of being an Eagle Scout. There's a big game refuge near where I grew up in Connecticut, and I actually redid all the signage on that 20,000-acre property, which involved stenciling a lot of wooden signs and painting them and then hanging them up. And it felt like a real...
Which park, may I ask?
It's called McLean Game Refuge.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I'm familiar with it. Okay. That's a nice nugget.
Yeah, those signs are probably all rotted away by now, but it was a long time ago. But it was...
but you see, here's what you see now as a photographer. I'm saying now they're actually going to be interesting to photograph, especially with a macro lens.
Ah, there you go.
See, so your signs are still doing things. Now they're first... I don't want to see shiny varnish. No, I want to see the lichens growing on them.
Oh, yeah.
So, anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So that was my project, and... it was interesting for the first 30 signs or something, and then got kind of tedious after that. And then I felt like
it's a job after that.
Well, I felt like, okay, now I feel like I'm not having fun, so I must be doing my goodwill project here.
Gotcha. Speaking about having fun, in the mid 80s, you were teaching electrical engineering at Columbia University and researching CCDs and focal plane image processing. How did you first get interested in CCD technologies and sensors in general?
Actually, I wound up getting a fellowship called the Howard Hughes Doctoral Fellowship and going out to the Hughes Aircraft Company in California during the summers.
Sure, yeah.
And I was working for the Hughes Missile Systems Group. And at the time, they were just introducing cameras into the head of missiles so they would hit the intended target. And I really learned a lot from 3 summers of working out there, technically, and it's fascinating. And because of my computer science background in artificial intelligence, I was also very interested in trying to marry cameras to artificial intelligence, which honestly, at the end of my career now, I still haven't really started yet, but I'm still interested in that.
Well, now seems to be a good time to spike up that interest.
Yeah.
I've read a few articles. It seems to be the next thing.
Yeah. Eric, I'm curious, those early guidance systems on missiles, was that derivative of Eugene Lally's work?
Yeah, he was involved in early imaging from, I believe, on the JPL side.
Yeah. I think there are claims that some of the stuff, theoretical or practical, it's unclear, involving like mosaic imaging, was almost like the primeval genesis of some of these ideas.
He was a real pioneer, that's for sure.
But then I was reading this really amazing slideshow that's from your website that really traces the whole history of digital imaging sensors all the way to 2008 when the slideshow was presented. And it seems like there was a lot of different companies and thinkers that were all in the early 60s involved in these really primitive digital sensing.
Absolutely. And as I may say more times in the next few minutes, all engineers stand on the shoulders of the giant engineers that came before us and scientists. And it's really true. And I think as I get older, I realize how important that is and how traditional that is, and how grateful I am for their pioneering work. And hopefully I can do the same for the next generation too.
So, Eric, after you graduated from Trinity and Yale, and you were working at Columbia University teaching engineering there, in 1990, you moved to California for a job at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Did you approach NASA about a job there, or did they come to you?
I was, working as a professor, but I had started to have contacts with people at JPL. And, they kind of roped me in, but it didn't take much effort because, I was born in October of 1957, so same month as Sputnik. And I always figured that must be why I have always been interested in space. And when I kind of went into more microelectronics engineering, I thought I was kissing off a possible career in space-related stuff. And so when all of a sudden it became clear that what I was working on was of interest to NASA, I was just like, oh, yeah, sign me up. And it wasn't immediate because it took a while to unwind from one job to the next. But
yeah, I bet.
They didn't have to ask twice.
That must have been quite a thrill.
It was. And it was a great place to work, by the way.
Did you have any interactions with the Skunk Works while you were out there working on any projects, just out of curiosity?
No, there's virtually no interaction between what was going on at JPL, which is in Pasadena, and Skunk Works, which was over the hill in Burbank.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, a different question then. And again, this is a public service announcement. We're using the term CCDs and CMOS a lot during the show, and we will continue to do so. In order for all of our listeners to have a better opportunity to understand what we're talking about, can you give us a brief overview of the differences along with the pluses and minuses between CCDs, which is what the earliest digital cameras were utilizing, and CMOS sensors, which have pretty much taken over the universe, and that's your baby?
Sure, yeah. So CCD stands for Charge Coupled Device, which was invented at Bell Labs in 1969. And it works by shifting electric charges in the semiconductor from like left to right by sort of a bucket brigade operation. By pulsing electrodes on the surface, you can kind of drag the carriers underneath along from left to right or then up or down. And, you always have to be careful that you transfer all the charge. It's like a bucket brigade where you're trying to put out a fire with water. It's kind of like important to transfer all the water so it gets to the fire. In this case, it's important to transfer all the electrons so it gets to the output amplifier and can be included in the image. If you leave stuff behind, it kind of blurs out the image. But charge-coupled devices work well. And I always say there's kind of two amazing things in engineering for me. One is that a 747 can actually get off the ground. And the other,
yes, that amazes me. Yes.
And the other is that a CCD actually works. Because they're very, very, very finicky devices to get working. But when they work well, they work well. And then the next generation, the CMOS devices we've been talking about, the CMOS comes from mainstream microelectronics. It means complementary metal oxide semiconductor. And that just really is the sandwich structure that's used to make that type of transistors that are in the integrated circuits. Here's an analogy that I like to say. Let's say you're at a football field and you want to measure the rain that's falling across the field. Let's just say it's a peculiar storm and there's lots of differences across the field of rainfall. So you get everybody lined up in rows, thousands of people, and each person has a bucket. And they hold the bucket up until they can get a measurable amount of rainfall into the bucket. And then someone blows a whistle and everybody starts the bucket brigade. And they start pouring their water into the bucket next to them, et cetera, et cetera. And then when it gets to the edge of the field, they go down the field the other direction, all the way out to the corner of the field. And somebody actually puts a measuring stick into the buckets of water as they come out. And you can work backwards and figure out what the rainfall was in different parts of the field. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in the CMOS image sensor, we just give every person on the field their own measuring stick. They can measure it, and we give them a walkie-talkie so they can call in the results. And then you don't have to do that whole bucket brigade thing. So there's not actually a radio or anything. It's just wires that we use to read out the amount of signal charge that came from light.
But that's all additional hardware and weight and size and bulk.
In a CCD, you could always lose a little bit of charge each time you transfer, and that's very bad. And that's the amazing part about CCD's work, because they really lose almost no charge as they transfer the charge. Maybe 1 million transfers, and they lose almost nothing.
Wow.
But in order to make a CCD work, you need a lot of supporting electronics, both for making it work and for reading out the signal. And that leads to a bulky camera and power-hungry camera as well.
Yeah, they go through batteries like nuts.
Right.
They're also very difficult. You have to manufacture CCDs in clean rooms. Essentially, it's almost like going to a center for disease control, where everyone is done up in gowns and stuff. Whereas a CMOS sensor you could make in the back of a Knish factory. Am I correct about that?
No, not at all.
I know I'm excited, but
no. In fact, modern CMOS is also made in clean rooms. In fact, people aren't even allowed in the clean room to make it stay clean. So it's like you're talking about having a hospital where the surgeons aren't allowed in the operating room, that kind of thing. So it's extra clean.
That I was not aware of at all. Interesting.
Well, that's because the size of the patterns that you're putting on those chips are just incredibly small, just hundreds of atoms wide. And any piece of dust anywhere on the chip could make the entire circuit not work. So that would make them very expensive. You have to throw most of them away after you get done making them.
Interesting.
But they do offer the benefit CMOS sensors in that.
Yeah, CMOS image sensors take a lot less energy to work because you don't have to do all that shifting.
Right.
And they are made in mainstream microelectronics technology. So there's a lot of infrastructure that's already been built to be able to make those kinds of devices.
And that's what you really honed in on as an opportunity to improve on the CCD, which needed these specialty fabrication parts. You can sort of make the argument that CMOS, we already have some of this stuff out there in the world, and so we can onboard these new manufacturing processes easier.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of leverage there, and the infrastructure is there. But there's another reason, too, for JPL, which is space-based cameras. And that is when the CCD goes out into space, it gets irradiated by cosmic rays and other things. And this is an exaggeration, but it kind of turns the silicon chip into Swiss cheese. And it makes it a lot harder to move the electrons from one part of the chip to the other part without them getting stuck in the Swiss cheese holes and lost. So the chips actually wear out over time. And that was a big problem for missions that might last for 10 years and are in like circling Jupiter where there's a lot of radiation, for example.
And you have to have huge solar arrays to keep these things charged if you were to use them, where CMOS doesn't require, I imagine, as large arrays to keep them all going as far as power.
Yep, the power requirement is a lot lower. So That's another big advantage. You don't have to fly a little nuclear generator out to Saturn or something maybe to keep everything running.
How does CMOS sensors evade cosmic rays better than CCDs?
Well, it's because you don't have to transfer the charge in this bucket brigade. So imagine that some buckets were leaky because they've been hit by a cosmic ray. Somewhere this analogy is going to fail, by the way. But
Right.
You're basically not having to pass your signal through those leaky buckets because you're just doing the measurement inside the pixel itself.
Mm.
It's an interesting thing, just to put a little photographic note into the conversation. When Leica went digital with their M camera back about 12 years ago, the M8, it was a APS-H sensor. It had a 1.3 magnification factor. That was a CCD, and it was followed by the M9, which was their first full-frame digital M camera. And that was, I believe, an 18 megapixel CCD. To this day, there are people that will not give up the M9, even though the new M10s and M11s, they're up to, 30, 40, 60 megapixel. They prefer the look and color and the dynamic range of the M9's CCD sensor, even though it's a dinosaur at this point in time. They just say the color is different. And they're willing to buy even though they have oxidation problems, the sensors have to be repaired and everything else. But there's a whole cult of people that are just sticking to the M9 CCD over CMOS technology. Even though for the most part, CMOS is caught up magnificently in terms of color rendition and dynamic range. But I just thought that was just an interesting little nugget of to go along with the conversation.
Well, there are people that still prefer film to solid state devices.
Oh, yeah.
Great. They're spending the money on it. They can do whatever they want to do. But I think the whole argument that, the look is better for some fundamental reason between a CCD and CMOS has been totally debunked over the years. It's just what people are used to, I think.
Well, it's also people used to buy films for different things. If you're doing portraits, you buy one kind of film. You're doing landscape, you buy a different kind of film. There are some people using these different cameras for depending on what they're shooting, especially with phones right now. We had a show recently where, the guest was saying, I use different phones for different applications because they render color differently. So I guess that's part of the deal too.
Yeah, scientifically, actually, there's absolutely no reason for that. But as I said, I'm not going to argue with people over this.
No, there's no win there. So the CMOS sensor that you invented in 1993, different from earlier CMOS. CMOS existed. Where did yours take off from where the other one left off?
Let's say the first active pixel device was built in the 60s.
Okay.
And it kind of worked. You got an image out. The technology was older, and the design led to a lot of different artifacts and noise. But as a solid-state device, it was definitely novel and interesting. But then the CC was invented in 1969, and it just worked so much better with that. It kind of put the kibosh on that whole active pixel sensor development.
So in other words, essentially that's something that's shiny or took away the attention from the CMOS?
Well, shinier and actually worked better.
Okay. All right.
So, and it worked a lot better, in fact. So what I did was I said, okay, I don't want to use a CCD for space for the reasons I've just mentioned, because of radiation and other wear-out mechanisms in long missions. But it sure would be a lot easier to avoid that charge transfer thing. But I know from earlier work that just doing we call a 3-transistor active pixel device gives a lot of noise. And what's noise? Noise means an additive signal that is different every time you go to measure it. And that means that you could be looking at something that's a very uniform image, a white cow in a snowstorm, and yet you would see, lots of background pattern in there, and it would be different every time you took a picture. So that's one kind of noise. The other noise is in light itself. When light, which is composed of little tiny particles of energy called photons, think of it as raindrops of energy, those raindrops don't come in at a nice, steady rate. It's not like the drip, drip of a water faucet. They come in statistically. And it's like looking at cars on the freeway or highway. If you want to measure the average traffic rate on a highway, you could close your eyes, open them up, count the number of cars, and close your eyes again. But every time you did that, you can imagine you would get a different number of cars depending on what the traffic was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing that happens with photons in the pixel.
Can I ask you a question? Are all photons the same size? Because you're mentioning the amount going by it each time you'd open up your eye. What about the size, individual size, like cars come in different sizes? Do photons come in different sizes, or is that a uniform entity?
Yeah, now we're going to get metaphysical here.
Right. That's true.
So,
hold on. Are they actually particles or are they waves? Let's ask that question.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So,
Don't hold back.
yeah, well, it's the wave-particle duality that's been around since the beginning of quantum mechanics. This is a kind of cool thing, actually. When light comes into a camera, we use the wave nature of light to refract the light and focus it on the film or the image sensor. But when it reaches the image sensor or the film, we're using the quantum nature of light, the fact that it's a particle, to actually go to one particular pixel or another pixel. So it's kind of cool. And, even in a camera in your pocket, it's doing that all the time. It's doing the wave-particle duality experiment.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, something to think
That's
about
fascinating.
sometime. Yeah. Wait, that's happening in my pocket.
Another thing to keep me up at night. Thank you. Thank you very much. 2 a.m, I'm going to be thinking about this.
When the photons come in, you also get an uncertainty in the apparent brightness of the light because of the number of photons that actually get collected by the pixel when the shutter is open, even if it's an electronic shutter. So both kinds of noise. One is kind of readout noise. One is kind of photon shot noise, as we call it. CMOS image sensors also these days have a lot lower noise, the intrinsic readout noise. And that's because we use a correlated double sampling inside, which is a whole nother thing, which I shouldn't explain.
No, actually, I was arguing earlier today with Mike about that. And that was my point exactly. And he said, no, you're wrong. So thank you for confirming what I assumed to be correct. There you go, Mike. See?
No, I owe you a pastrami sandwich. That's true.
Well, it's funny you mentioned pastrami because the way I usually teach this to students is I say there's a little bit of measurement error inside the pixel too, which also happens in a CCD when it comes out. But, and it's kind of like you go to the deli and you have this little plastic tray, but every tray is not exactly the same. So they weigh different amounts. And what you really want to do is, if you want to measure the amount of stuff that goes inside the container, is first you weigh the container, right? And then you zero out the scale, and then you put the material in that you want to actually pay for into the container, and you subtract one from the other. And that way, the irregularity in the container weight doesn't get inadvertently added to your bill.
Science and delicatessen synergy here. This is
Yeah. Hey, you mentioned pastrami, so
So, Eric, your development of the CCD sensor resulted from NASA's mandate for faster, better, cheaper, and to minimize cameras and economize in cost. If you hadn't received that directive from above, do you think you'd have explored CMOS sensors as a viable option?
Well, I had been thinking about image sensors for a few years before then. But, it's just kind of like, I wonder why this would be cool, but who needs it? That's not really my job right now. So
so it was in your mind.
Yeah, it was in my mind. Actually, the story's all about money, because once NASA decides that it needs something, it's willing to spend money on it. If it doesn't need it, nobody's really interested in spending money on something they don't need. And I guess as a taxpayer, we should feel good about that. Although sometimes research leads to things that you don't anticipate.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it was really that driver. I was able to argue why we had to do this development or explore these CMOS image sensor technology. And NASA invested in that. And that was why you have the camera in your pocket right now.
Amazing.
We get a lot of consumer technologies from NASA. I think more than most people acknowledge it. Teflon is right out of the space program. They needed some kind of a material that will not burn up as it re-enters the atmosphere and protect the astronauts, and that's what Teflon is. And well, now we're cooking with this stuff, but basically it's a heat shield for returning a spacecraft. A lot of things came out of the space program that people say, why are we pouring all our money into this? Well, here's where we get it back.
Yeah. I saw a NASA publication, Spin-Off magazine, I think, where they claim that the CMOS image sensor technology is their most ubiquitous spin-off technology that they've ever had from the space program.
I don't doubt it with cell phones, for sure. Yeah. It's probably upwards of tens of billions, at least.
Certainly. Yeah, probably about 6 to 8 billion per year are made, and hopefully they last a few years. So
it's crazy. By the way, these are all coming from the Taiwanese semiconductor manufacturing company. Is that the only fabrication plant?
So Sony has its own manufacturing plants, and Samsung has its own manufacturing plants, and a lot of other companies do use TSMC as a foundry where they make the chips according to your specifications. So, there's a lot of different sources, but sometimes I tell my students to just imagine there's only one factory and there's a conveyor belt, and for 6 billion or so cameras per year, that's about 120 or 130 cameras per second on that conveyor belt.
Right. Yeah.
And you couldn't even see it; it'd just be a blur. And then I usually tell them also, don't forget that 3 or 4 years from now, there's another conveyor belt with the exact same number of cameras on them going into landfill.
Right.
And
Yeah. Well, that's all electronics. That's kind of a crazy thing. When you were hired by the JPL, obviously it was for space work specifically. You had to get a camera that was going to be smaller, lighter, quicker, more efficient, and not allergic to radiation. At what point did you start thinking in terms of the commercial applications, or was it a joint thing between you and JPL? Because did they have commercial applications in mind when you first went on board, or was this not even part of the conversation at that point?
Well, kind of two things. One is, yes, NASA is a taxpayer-funded agency, as is all of us at JPL were taxpayer-funded, essentially. And personally, I think it's important to give back to taxpayers whenever we can. So finding commercial applications of a new technology that can help create jobs and even more jobs in the case of the CMOS image sensor technology, that's an important thing. But it wasn't top of mind. As you said, the number one mission was to support NASA's needs. But, after we got done high-fiving each other on the technology that's working, which never happened, but figuratively it sounds good, like, wow, this technology is probably good down here on Earth, too. And could be used for a lot of places, small cameras. And we tried to transfer this technology to U.S. industry. So I went out on the road. I went to Motorola, and I went to Intel, and I went to Kodak and National Semiconductor and a number of other companies.
American companies.
U.S. companies, that's right. Said, hey, look at this cool technology. All these chips for camcorders right now are being made in Japan. And we could build really tiny cameras here in the U.S. using this technology. And basically, they're like, oh, that's cool. Really interesting. Thanks for coming over and talking to us. And, we'll think about maybe a product in a few years.
I think Intel did, right? Didn't they release a webcam with the CMOS sensor early on?
They did. But that still took years also in the making. And they used my company's sensor, by the way.
And by the way, we should say your company was called Photobit, right?
Yeah. So when we realized that none of these companies were going to bite anytime in the near future, and I didn't really want the Japanese companies to move faster than the U.S. companies and take the market by storm. we decided, you know what, we should just try doing our own company because it's our baby and we need to nurture it, and let's do it.
Now, this is you and your wife at the time. Now, she also worked with you at JPL. Now, it was the two of you basically created this offshoot, Photobit, that basically pushed the commercial applications of CMOS technology onto the cameras and everything else we talked about at the head of the show. Now, where did you expect a lot of pushback or resistance from JPL to have a company specifically set up to do commercial applications of technologies that were developed for them? What was the arrangement or understanding that you had with JPL when you started this venture?
Yeah, good question. So JPL is funded mostly by NASA, but
Right.
it's part of CalTech. So we're all CalTech employees. And the intellectual property, like the patents, are also owned by CalTech. So when we decided to do this spinoff, there were kind of two different problems. I mean, we could quit JPL anytime, but we needed to get a license to the technology.
Right.
And also, we had two small children at home. And Sabrina, who's a PhD and engineer working in the same field, was out on maternity leave. And
did you use the kids as collateral for the startup?
No, it's actually worse. It's a worse story than that. I'm going to tell you that I was like, "Hey, Sabrina, if we had a computer at home and you're good at designing these chips, maybe in your spare time, you could design chips for companies." Which she was very enthusiastic about, by the way. She didn't divorce me at that time, so that was good. So she actually went to CalTech and negotiated a license to the intellectual property. CalTech had never before given JPL employees a license to technology that they had developed at JPL. And fortunately, there was a wiser person in charge of the tech transfer office at that time. And he realized that, who's going to be the most excited about making sure this technology makes it into the hands of consumers, for example, is going to be inventors, right? Because it's your baby. You want to see it grow. And so Photobit got that first CalTech license to develop technology developed at JPL. And CalTech has done that many, many more times since then. But it was still a difficult negotiation. Sabrina did all of that. And, we had two small kids. I had to keep my job at JPL. But a couple of other people from my team joined Sabrina. And we were literally in the basement of our house. And, I would leave in the morning, drive away, go to JPL, and a bunch of cars would pull up and these guys would get out and go into the house. I don't know. I don't know what the neighbors were thinking.
What was the first commercial application that you were able to sell to somebody for whatever purpose it was? What was your first, Yahoo moment there?
Well, the business was kind of divided into two sort of things. One was people came to us with specific problems to solve.
Okay.
And this would be like, we want to have this swallowable pill that has a camera in it that goes down and, takes photographs of your small intestine. Or we want to take x-rays in a dentist office, and we need to use your technology for that. Or in the case of cars, we have this problem of we want to dim the headlights when an oncoming car is coming. Can you help us solve that problem with your technology? So we got a lot of those kinds of inquiries, custom products. But then also we decided, okay, generally we should produce a product that everybody could use or many people could use. And the first real product was something for a web camera, which we sold to both Logitech and to Intel. You mentioned the Intel web camera. I still have one in my drawer, as a matter of fact. And it was a great selling product. And then Intel, unfortunately, decided that they didn't want to be in the consumer products business anymore.
Bummer.
So it had nothing to do with the sales of the camera or anything. They just pulled the plug on that whole consumer products division. But Logitech used our sensor and a competitor sensor as well in their products.
By the way, at this time, was there a real concrete idea of a sort of arms race between, you guys and folks in Japan who would be first to get this type of product to market at scale? Was there sort of a, we should do this quickly because maybe you visited Japan or saw what they were doing or...
Well, many years earlier, I'd gone to Japan just to find out what might be coming down the pike that NASA could use without having to develop itself, and to ask them questions about, do we want to put the analog to digital converter on the chip? Why don't you do that? You could do that. Why don't you do it? Mm-hmm. And learn from them, basically. Again, shoulders of giants kind of things. There were some great engineers in Japan. But then as far as competition goes, we published a lot of papers at JPL, part of the public taxpayer services to, actually explain what you've been doing, and so that other companies could pick it up and commercialize it, whether Japanese companies or U.S. companies or other companies. And so there were a number of small startups that also started a little after Photobit. But, they were trying to get into the market, and it was a niche market, right, where like the power consumption was really important, for example, compared to CCDs, and where maybe image quality wasn't quite as important because those early CMOS sensors were not quite as sharp or high resolution as the CCDs. Yeah, so there was a sense of competition and pressure to not screw up. But eventually, the Japanese also came into the market. Toshiba was the first one that started working on CMOS image sensors, and soon after that, Sony and some of the other, Panasonic, I guess, and also Samsung in South Korea, started working on the technology. So there was a lot of competition that was coming up around 2000, 2001 time period.
And by the way, the products that those companies came up with at around that time, are they having to pay licensing fees back to CalTech because of the derivatives of the technology from the CMOS inception?
Yeah, there's a much longer story in there, but CalTech actually wound up having to file a lawsuit against many of them. Mm-hmm. But yes, eventually they wound up paying CalTech royalties.
Right.
Okay, we are going to take a short break, and we come back more with Eric Fossum and the history of the CMOS sensor. Stay tuned.
Light up your Twitch streams, podcasts, and remote presentations with the Logitech LitraBeam LX, a slender two-sided light fixture with a bright key light on one side and an RGB accent light on the other. The LitraBeam LX delivers natural, radiant skin tones while simultaneously stylizing your background with the full LightSync RGB spectrum. And as part of the Logitech G ecosystem, you can sync the LitraBeam LX with other Logitech G products using Bluetooth or USB via the G Hub application. Head on over to bnh.com for more information about the Logitech G series, or use the link in our podcast show notes.
Okay, we are back with Eric Fossum, and we're talking about the development of the CMOS sensor, which is something that's part of all of our lives constantly, from the time we wake up to the time we go to sleep, pretty much. Now, Eric, with your company, you were pretty much pioneers out there, but it wasn't long before there was competition, other people coming up with similar ideas. And again, it's competition of new technologies. And so you had stuff going on here domestically, and then Japan had their corporations coming up with their own ideas. At some point, you realized that your company wasn't big enough to take them all on the way you wanted to take them on, or would like to take them on. So what action did you take?
Yeah, well, Sabrina and I were essentially co-running the company in different roles at different times. In fact, we used to spend a lot of times in the evening talking around the dinner table about Photobit and its future, to the point where the kids would be like, stop talking about Photobit. But yeah, I mean, at one point we looked at each other across the table and was like, wow, this could be really big, and we don't know what we're doing. We grew the company to 135 people or something, but to take it to a $1 billion company.
I assume you were no longer working in your house with 130 people every day.
No, we had moved to Pasadena and had our regular office and everything. But we did come to that realization. It's like, well, we just don't really have the experience or skill set, and time is of the essence. We can't really kind of build the company organically and learn as we grow because we got to go full speed now. We brought in some people that we thought would be helpful with a lot of experience, and that didn't actually work out too well at some point. But also at some point, we were like, well, maybe we should just sell the company. And we wound up talking to Micron, and they acquired the assets of Photobit in 2001.
Did you feel like you were losing your baby when you entered into those negotiations? I imagine it had to be personal on a certain level.
Yes. It was a challenging time for all of us, I think. But I don't really regret it. It was financially a sound move. And the only thing I learned is that you can't go from running your own small company to working for somebody in a big company. It's just not possible.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, did you work at Micron?
I tried because I thought, this was my team. These are people I hired. I wanted to stick with them and see this thing through, but was not the way it played out.
And you knew it was a problem when they took the pencil sharpener away and the stapler, that was it.
I'm going to tell you that we were on the 7th floor of an office building in Pasadena, and where the elevators open, we had a nice carpet with the Photobit logo in that little elevator lobby. And on day 2, Micron came in and with a box cutter cut that carpet out and replaced it with just something else. Yeah.
Ouch.
And then,
oh, boy.
So, we knew
White feet here.
Yeah. Life had changed for us.
Wow. And how long was it after you left Micron before you ended up at Dartmouth?
Yeah, so that was 2002 or 2003 that I left Micron. And I actually retired for like 3 years, did my bucket list. And then...
Is that when you started your farm?
Yes, we moved to bought a place in New Hampshire and started enjoying life in New Hampshire compared to California. Even though I grew up in Connecticut, New Hampshire is just an amazing state to live in. But everybody should not move here. Please don't.
So it's free-range microchips that you're raising on this farm?
Grass-fed.
Yeah. Grass-fed.
I'm sorry.
I wound up running a MEMS company for a while out in California, and then I also did consulting for Samsung in Korea for like 4 years, which was kind of interesting. That was actually a fun experience.
I would imagine being a consultant is probably one of the best options for you at that particular time because, again, you don't have to get stuck too deep into stuff that's just not fun, and it gets you a chance to just travel around and exchange ideas and actually be valued because, again, they're flying you in. They want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, well, it's a little more complicated than that.
Oh, I like simplifying things.
But there was actually a team of about 60 engineers that I was supposed to lead into developing 3D imaging. Samsung wanted to sell 3D television sets. If you remember, at one point that was kind of a popular idea. But then they realized we don't have any media to put on those things, so we got to have cameras that can capture stuff that captures 3D. And so there was kind of a crash project on that I was more or less leading as a technical person. And we were moved along pretty well. And then all of a sudden, when we had success, Samsung said, yeah, but you know what? We can make more money selling conventional CMOS image sensor chips than these 3D chips. So we're just going to put this in the freezer for a while. And I think that they've been thawing that technology recently. And then I was really tired of jet lag also, because going to South Korea for a week every month is a lot of jet lag time. Yeah, I looked around New Hampshire and it's like, here's a map, and there's Dartmouth, and there's MIT, and there's Harvard, and Yale way down there. And but Dartmouth is in New Hampshire. I love New Hampshire. Let me just inquire, see if I could, get some sort of part-time thing going there, give back. And I emailed the dean, and then I want to come into Dartmouth, and that was a great move. Dartmouth is just a super small liberal arts college with a very strong engineering school and medical school and business school, and really enjoyed it up here.
Around that time, I heard that you also helped a friend with a book that he was writing, and he asked you to write a chapter about the possible future paths for a perfect, perhaps, or optimal sensor. And you just sort of waxed philosophical about stuff. And that led to, I guess, some further ideas about what could be happening in the future of this.
That was actually during my retirement bucket list period. And Junichi Nakamura asked me to write a chapter on the future of image sensors. And I thought about it for a while and suggested something that was going to be completely impossible, but maybe could be interesting. And when I got to Dartmouth many years later, I thought this would be a great university project because it'll never end.
Right.
Because we'll never. But actually, I was able to get support. Rambus, for example, was a very early supporter of that research, and managed to find a couple of great graduate students. And as we worked the problem, all of a sudden realized that we could solve it. And the problem was, how can you detect these photons, this rain, energy rain that's coming in as light, one photon at a time, and just count the photons? And you can have really itty-bitty pixels, and maybe each pixel only stores one electron corresponding to one photon. What would imaging be like in that case? So we developed that and actually got it to work, which amazed me. And we're actually able to count individual photons at room temperature with like a megapixel sensor chip that my students designed at Dartmouth with no prior real sensor design experience.
Amazing. And
they were fabricated at TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation in Taiwan, using pretty advanced technology. And then my students looked at me and said, "We should start a company." And I was like, "Oh man, that's a lot of work." But we did. So we co-founded a company called Gigajot, and it was out in Pasadena, quite successful.
To put it in perspective just quickly, this new sensor is about counting a single photon that results in a single electron.
Yeah, the weakest possible light condition.
Right. In CMOS sensors, even the most advanced ones, do you have any idea as to, at a particular photosite, how many photons those photosites are counting?
Sure. Yeah, they're typically counting thousands.
Right. So it's many orders of magnitude more.
Right. But you can't tell if they collected, especially in low light conditions, where they collected 70 electrons or 72 electrons. You can't really differentiate that. Whereas in this technology, you can actually tell quite clearly it was 71. It wasn't 70. It wasn't 72. It was 70. Right. And we're highly confident about that, like 99% sure.
Yeah. So it does sound like when you're writing this stuff for the chapter of the book, it does feel like this is just so science fictional. This is speculative, like out there fiction. And 10 years later, you're fabricating the chips. That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, that's what engineers live for, right? Getting a really challenging problem and working it and then getting results. So, being able to see in the weakest possible light, the dimmest possible light, is very important for things like security or defense or maybe for cars and stuff like that. So, I'm very hopeful that this technology will go somewhere.
Now, something I'm kind of curious, you've seen zillions of applications of your inventions and all the technologies that you've brought to the marketplace. What would be the most surprising one in a positive way that you've seen your work used in? And what would you say is the most disappointing or disturbing, if I could use that word, for of the technologies that you've brought to us?
Well, let's start at the low end of the spectrum.
Okay.
So I think the lowest end that I heard of was in China. They had problems with public restrooms and people taking too much toilet paper when they use the restroom. And so they put up facial recognition cameras based on the CMOS image sensor technology that would be able to tell if somebody had already taken toilet paper from some other restroom already, and then just deny them the ability to get toilet paper again.
Toilet paper quota for the day and use it up.
So, I told you I was going to start with the low end. And I'm not really a big fan of facial recognition as a general surveillance tool.
Well, anybody if you've not been to China, I mean, when we travel here in the Western Hemisphere, you go to the airport, you have your boarding pass. Okay, in China, you step up, you look into the facial recognition thing with your with eye sense, whatever it is, and they issue you your boarding pass because they already know where you're going. They just want to verify it's you. So it's pretty incredible that what they've done, and yeah, it's frightening.
Yeah,
but the toilet paper, you've taught me on that one. Okay, and on the opposite end of that spectrum,
yeah, I think the opposite end is the fact that everybody having a camera in their pocket has led to a lot of cases where social justice is helped by people being able to use that camera in their pocket to, capture images. They may not tell the whole story, but, help sort out what's going on in some very unpleasant situations and help deliver justice.
It definitely clears up a lot of, he said, she said, or they said kind of thing, at least partially. You have some kind of foundation to work with. But yeah, I would say it's pretty important.
Police body cams.
Police cameras, I think, are probably as helpful to the police as they are to the average citizen. Just, it's like, hey, no, this is really what happened. That guy pulled a gun on me, and here's the proof. As opposed to, oh, you're just making that up. So on both sides of the social justice spectrum, I think it's important.
I know, personally speaking, I love watching dash cam crashes. I find them fascinating. My wife says, that's kind of weird. I go, yeah, but have you noticed how much more carefully I'm driving these days? She goes, you're right. I watch these and it's made me be so much more careful out. I'm not a cowboy on the road anymore. That's one of the good things about watching these. You realize how stupid people really are. And you become a little more cautious when you're behind the wheel. So for me, that's been a benefit.
So Eric, in addition to being a professor at Dartmouth, you're also director of its PhD innovation program. Based on all your experience with higher learning, what's your view of the current educational system for STEM and connections between academia and the real world?
Yeah, well, our PhD innovation program is about teaching PhD students that are normally learning how to do research, but also teach them entrepreneurial thinking skills so they could think about how they could commercialize their technology, either the stuff they develop at Dartmouth, or maybe, 10 years from now, they still have that skill set. And they, of course, the undergraduates also get a lot of entrepreneurial thinking experience, at least at Dartmouth. It's a distinctive feature of the School of Engineering in Dartmouth as a whole. As far as STEM education goes, I don't even know what to say. It's like, of course, STEM is important. And engineering itself is a very creative field and fits in really well with the liberal arts, which also have a lot of creativity in them. So I think that it's really necessary for most college-educated students today to have some sort of exposure to science, technology, engineering, and math, just so they can kind of understand the world as it's going on today, which is so STEM dependent.
Yeah. Do you see the opportunities for STEM education within academia growing at the same rate as technology is developing in the wider world, do you think?
Yeah, I think we do across the country. I think universities are doing a pretty good job of keeping up with demand. Maybe demand is a little bit higher than the number of students we can supply. Yeah, it's certainly not a shrinking area. It's a growing area.
And what about for students who are excited about exploring those realms and looking for programs? Do you have any suggestions about ways to find the right educational program for an individual?
People are looking for different experiences at college, let's say. And my personal preference, which spilled over to my own children, I think, is to go to a small liberal arts college for your undergraduate education, because the faculty are there to teach and class size is smaller, so there's no escape, in fact. And you get a sound education. And at the graduate school level, master's or PhD, there are a lot of top-notch schools, Dartmouth being one of them, where you can get an excellent education. And in fact, we attract a lot of international students as well because of the quality of education in the United States compared to abroad. It's basically time to call up your favorite AI-powered search engine and think about the things that you want. The big school, small school, you want to be rural, you want to be urban, you want high levels of diversity, do you want a sunny climate, do you want to be forced to stay inside all winter long and study, which would be Dartmouth. Although actually we have a great outdoors program in the wintertime.
Any thoughts about AI before we bring things to a close here? I know that's a big topic all over the place, and obviously you've worked with it early on in different capacities. What's your take on it? Do you fear it? Are you? What's your take?
I mean, in my field of image sensor technology, image capture technology, being able to authenticate images at the source or from the source is going to become increasingly important, because with AI, you can generate images that are almost indistinguishable from an actual photograph.
Yes. Well, there are two cameras were just recently introduced that actually do that, verify, they have confirmation of the image. So that's already happening within the industry.
Mm-hmm. Because the old adage of seeing is believing is like...
Oh, forget about that.
Yeah, you got to kind of forget about it. It's kind of too bad. But I'm sure we'll figure out ways to authenticate images, and hopefully it won't be too disruptive politically or otherwise going forward.
So on that happy note, Professor, it's really been wonderful speaking to you. It's interesting to talk about things that are like a little bit beyond our own mental grasp here, and being on the cutting edge of technologies that are pretty much going to be guiding us moving forward in photography in the future, and how all this works out. And it's amazing to be able to speak to somebody who has greatly affected us as photographers and continues to do so. And we listed awards and accomplishments up front. But rumor has it you just got a whole new award or a prize. Can you elaborate on that a little bit for us?
I suppose you're talking about the Trinity College President's Medal for Science and Innovation.
How did you guess?
Yeah, well,
yeah.
So I went to Trinity College. I'm an alum, and I'm former trustee as well. They created this inaugural medal for science and innovation. The president did, and it's time to be given out at the bicentennial celebration of the college, 200 years. And so it happens in a few weeks from the time we're recording this. So looking forward to that. It feels good to go back to your college and be recognized for something you've done.
No doubt. No doubt. Well, congratulations. That is great. And again, thank you for joining us. Fascinating conversation. Lots of food for thought. What about upcoming projects that you have going on? Anything you want to fill us in on?
Well, I continue to do research at Dartmouth with a few graduate students. And right now we are looking at the application of photon counting image sensors for NASA applications. Talk about full circle, trying to evaluate how the different technologies out there, the Quanta image sensor, which is a low power, high resolution sensor, could be useful in some applications, maybe for searching for other planets, for example. And the other photon counting image sensor technology that's also developing is the single photon avalanche detector, SPAD. And that one has characteristics of being very high speed photon detection, but very low resolution, comparatively speaking. And there's a few other devices also for single photon detection. But NASA's become quite interested in this whole one photon at a time for things that are really distant and very dim. And so we're kind of exploring that. We also are doing some work on very high speed image sensors, we call burst mode sensors, where you, inside every pixel, you might store 100 pixels worth of data. So it's like a local memory storage on the sensor. And that way you can take, maybe 20 million frames per second for a burst of 100 or 200 frames in a row. So very, very high-speed phenomena can be captured that way. It's not a brand new idea, but we've just been exploring that for particular materials science.
Is it brand new in the fact that it can be 20 million times a second and also, multiple hundreds of sequences? Is that a new thing?
No, we copied some other people on that idea, going back to the late Walter Kozanaki, who probably demonstrated that about 20 years ago. But for particular applications, you have to do it at a certain speed and a certain number of frame storage. And in this application, which is done for the Department of Energy, we also try to do it in a very accessible semiconductor fabrication recipe instead of a more fancy but very difficult to get access to manufacturing recipe.
I would imagine that heat is an issue when you're dealing with that much data contained in such a small area. Is that a correct assumption?
Oh, yeah, it can warm up pretty fast. But fortunately, taking 200 frames at 20 million frames per second doesn't take very long. So it does heat up, but it doesn't heat up for long. So
okay, all right, okay. Because I feel it's just a whole other technical issue you got to deal with there. But we're going to save that for another episode, though. Something to live for. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a fascinating conversation, and I'm hoping that our listeners enjoyed it as much as we did. So again, thank you for joining us once again today.
Thank you. I should mention before we go that much of the work I've described has been done with either groups of people, either my colleagues at JPL or my graduate students at Dartmouth, for example. And this progress would not have been possible without all of their combined efforts.
Collaboration. Good point. And thank you for pointing that out. It is a very good point. Okay. If you are a fan of the show but not yet a subscriber, head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts and click subscribe. You can also find us on the Explorer blog where we post photos from our guests and show notes. And please join us on Facebook at the B&H Photography Podcast Group, where you can share your favorite photos and comments about the show. My name is Alan Weitz. Jill Waterman is our creative producer. Episodes are recorded, mixed, and edited by technical producer Mike Weinstein. Our executive producer is Bjorn Peterson, and our editorial director is Sean Steiner. On behalf of all of the above, thank you oh so much for tuning in today.
Thanks to Logitech for sponsoring this week's episode.